People across this country are evolving on that issue and moving in a direction that demonstrates support for it. So I think it is time to reopen that conversation and ask Texans where they are on it to see if that's something we might change legislatively if it doesn't happen constitutionally.
That is Wendy Davis, a Democratic candidate for governor in Texas last month, on whether she would push for legislation to overturn her state's ban on same-sex marriage. Abby, you cover Texas politics like nobody else. I wonder, this is another, very conservative red state. This is, I haven't seen the latest polling on gay marriage there, but I imagine it's probably fairly similar to Kentucky. When there was a court ruling for it recently, Rick Perry, the outgoing governor, was quick to condemn it. There's a lot of, it's an uphill battle, I know, that Wendy Davis is facing, but when it comes to navigating same-sex marriage in Texas, can you give us a taste of what she's dealing with?
Well, the big difference, I think, between Texas and Kentucky, right, is obviously that there's a much higher proportion of voters of color. And I think because of that, you have an interesting dynamic. People like Houston Governor, Houston mayor, not quite its own state yet, went and got married. She's a lesbian. In San Antonio, Mayor Castro has been quite out in front in his support of gay marriage. And so in these cities, which are huge population centers, but largely voters of color, you're seeing a pretty strong shift, I think, to sort of being unafraid of the political implications of saying, I'm support gay marriage. Meanwhile, you've got to win the rest of the state. And that's Wendy Davis's problem, is that Wendy Davis has to walk this line of trying to kind of attract more voters from suburbs, more white voters. An interesting, I think, break is that women tend to support gay marriage much more than men. And so if you look at Wendy Davis's and sort of the Battleground Texas, which is a group of kind of former Obama staffers that are trying to make Texas a competitive state, they're really looking at increasing voter turnout among voters of color, particularly Latino voters, and trying to swing female voters. And I think that's sort of the political calculus in Texas for someone like Wendy Davis, who's trying to maybe not get too far, but certainly the people down the road, like Julian Castro, who you've got to figure also thinks he has a pretty strong political future in the state, is probably thinking, soon enough, those groups are going to add up to enough that I don't need to worry so much about these old white evangelical voters who might
I mean, like I said, we can look at in Kentucky. We can see, 10 years ago 75%, now 55%. You can imagine in 10 more years that'll probably change a little bit more. Mark, I wonder how you look at that. We were trying to go through the list before the show, and who are the remaining Democratic senators who are against gay marriage? And I think it's Mark Pryor and Joe Manchin. And there's a little question of exactly where Mary Landrieu comes in. Let's play a clip here. This is from November. Joe Manchin did an Ask Me Anything, one of those Reddit things, and he was asked about gay marriage, and this was how he addressed it.
I was raised in Little Farmington, West Virginia. I don't believe in any aspect of discrimination. I wasn't raised that way. No matter who you are, what you are, no discrimination. Human beings should treat each other as human beings. With that being said, I do believe that marriage is between a man and a woman.
So I wonder how you think about this nationally, because West Virginia, obviously, very conservative state. There's a Senate race playing out there this year where the Republican is, currently expected to win. You have somebody like Joe Manchin who's still against gay marriage, but he's also for ENDA, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, and you could make the case that from the U.S. Senator standpoint, it's more important, from the gay rights standpoint, to be voting for ENDA than to have a position on gay marriage, because the Senate's probably going to be dealing with ENDA more than gay marriage. How do you think about somebody like Joe Manchin? Do you say, yeah, we got to cut him some slack here because he's from West Virginia?
Well, what I'd say is that the people are ahead of the politicians in the South. What this Washington Post poll showed that you talked about first was that 50% of Southerners across the board support the freedom to marry, 42% oppose. And I think the politicians are catching up to where people are, and things are moving so quickly that it's hard for the elected officials to catch up to where people are.
But it's still, like we say, in Kentucky, it would seem the numbers suggest a weapon that Republicans and opponents of gay marriage could use, like the Bush campaign did in 2004. Dewan, I'm interested in your personal story as well in Kentucky, because I think that could tell us something about the culture of the state. When you announced that you're gay, I imagine it was a big surprise to a lot of people in the state. And tell me about what the reaction was like. What did you hear from Kentuckians?
I've gotten a lot of positive reaction. And on the flip side of that, there have also, let me go back to what actually prompted, you know, the writing of the blog and the coming out was I was involved in a lot of conversations where I was hearing people say things like, this is the abomination of our nation, and this is, you know, Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve kind of things. And it fired me up because, you know, people would be talking to me not knowing, you know, hey, I'm gay as well. I don't believe in what you're saying. And I think that people are not aware enough to know, and the more that we bring about that awareness, the more it, I guess, kind of brings about that sensitivity in people to understand, like, this is not a conversation about those people. Like, these are people that are your neighbors. These are people that you work with. These are people that you see in the drive-thru every day, wherever you go. Like, they are everywhere. And I think that that's what really needs to be the main focus of the conversation, is understanding that these are just human beings.
I was going to say, I think, you know, also the sort of shift from it being a conversation about marriage and the sort of threat to marriage versus a conversation about discrimination, right? The sort of Arizona laws that get so much attention, you know, and you have this sort of comparison to lunch counters, right? And sort of the idea that this is a civil rights issue as opposed to this is a threat to your church. I think that's been a transition since the Bush years that's really made it a lot more given a lot more political space for people in these states, you know, like Joe Manchin sort of gives himself some room so that then if he decides he wants to move over further, he can say, well, I've always said I was against discrimination, and now I've realized this is a discrimination issue, right?
Right.
You know, and I was going to say, in Texas, you have Mark McKinnon, who was one of the Bush administration architects around the 2004 election. I think pushed heavily some of the rhetoric, I don't know that he personally, but was very involved in a campaign that was using this as a wedge issue, who's now, I mean, I'm sure you can speak to this more, but now has taken the lead in a Texas group on trying to win more rights for gay men and women in
He's
Texas.
one of our chairs of Southerners for the Freedom to Marry, and things are changing quickly because people are thinking about their kids and they're thinking about what kind of legacy they want to present to their kids. You know, when this issue came up to me, was I for discrimination or was I against it? Do I want to treat others as though the way I want to be treated? And we're seeing that a lot all over the country. Things are moving so quickly.
Well, I want to talk about sort of where the end game is on this, you know, talking years down the line. You know, we've reached a point now, we've put the map up on the screen before where there's sort of a gay marriage divide in this country that almost mirrors the red state, blue state divide. So when this becomes something that's as accepted in red states as in blue states, we're going to try to figure out when that is going to happen and what to look for on that path. We'll pick that conversation up right after this.